I'm Judd Myers.
I'm Scott Tipton.
Welcome to Blastoff.
Greetings, people of Earth. Your Blastoff co-host Scott Tipton here with another one of our home shows. First up this week, I'll be dropping some comic book science on y'all in a new edition of Comics 101, where we'll be covering Marvel Comics' original Green Goliath, the Incredible Hulk. Then, Harley Salbaka is back with a new edition of Small Talk, chatting with another one of our favorite low regulars. And finally, in this week's Retails, Judd Myers talks about a very special customer and a very special four-letter word. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it!
The history of comic books, the characters you love, and the people who created them. This is Scott Tipton's Comics 101.
Maybe the best known of Marvel's characters after Spider-Man, the green-skinned Goliath, the Incredible Hulk, has found success in animation, live-action TV, and the silver screen. But it all started on the four-color pages of the comics. Marvel editor Stan Lee was looking to follow up the success of his first big hit, Fantastic Four. He considered another team book, but didn't want to repeat himself. He thought about doing a Superman-style strongman, but rejected the notion as too routine. Then, inspiration struck. What about a comic where the good guy is also the bad guy? A longtime fan of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, as well as the classic Universal horror movies, Stan had always empathized with the misunderstood creature. Why not transfer the misunderstood monster to comics? Stan also borrowed from Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, giving his monster hero the ability to change back and forth from man to beast. As Stan recalled in Origins of Marvel Comics, now all that remained was to find a name. I knew I needed a perfect name for a monstrous, potentially murderous hulking brute who... And then I stopped. It was the word hulking that did it. It conjured up the perfect mental image. I knew I had found his name. He had to be the Hulk. And with that, Stan sent his synopsis to Marvel's artistic ace Jack Kirby, who illustrated the Hulk's first issue and designed all the major characters. Stan and Jack's creation hit newsstands in May of 1962 with the premiere issue of The Incredible Hulk. The story introduces Dr. Bruce Banner, later amended to Robert Bruce Banner after Stan had a bit of a brain freeze and started referring to the character as Bob Banner, nuclear scientist and creator of the Gamma Bomb, a potentially devastating new atomic weapon about to be tested by the U.S. military. Banner is cautious of safety regulations, but General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross demands that the bomb be detonated immediately. Bruce is defended by the general's daughter, Betty, who has eyes for the shy scientist. Finally, Banner is ready to test his Gamma device, and the countdown commences. Surveying the detonation site, Banner notices a teenager cruising his car through the heart of Ground Zero. Banner yells at his assistant Igor to halt the countdown, then runs out to get the boy to safety. Unfortunately, Banner has no idea that his assistant is actually a dirty communist spy sent by his Soviet masters to obtain the secrets of the Gamma Bomb. You would think the name Igor might have been something of a clue. Igor decides to eliminate Banner and does not halt the countdown. Banner reaches the test site just soon enough to throw the teenager, Rick Jones, into a protective trench. But Banner is too late to save himself, and he catches the full blast of gamma radiation released by the explosion. Banner regains consciousness later that night. He's been locked in an observation room, along with Jones, who survived without a scratch. Banner, however, is not so lucky. As night falls, Banner begins to mutate before Jones's very eyes, growing much taller and more muscular, bursting through the seams of his clothes, with his skin turning a deathly gray color. But wait a minute, you say. Isn't the Hulk supposed to be green? In the first issue of The Incredible Hulk, the Hulk is indeed gray, as Stan intended. However, when Stan saw the final printed magazine, he decided that the gray color wasn't printing consistently enough. He changed the Hulk's color to green, and green it remained until the notion of a gray Hulk was reintroduced, much later in 1986. At first, the Hulk emerges only at night. For a short while, Banner himself triggers the transformations in an attempt to control the Hulk. Banner knows of Hulk's existence, but has no memory of his actions when transformed, while the childlike Hulk often forgets about his existence as Bruce Banner. In time, a new catalyst develops, one that cements the success of the series. When Bruce Banner becomes upset, angry, or otherwise placed under stress, he loses control and transforms into the Hulk. As the Hulk grows more and more angry, his strength increases exponentially, with seemingly no limit. Or, in the words of the Hulk himself, the madder Hulk gets, the stronger Hulk gets. The Hulk's magazine only lasted 6 issues. After that, Stan employed Hulk as a kind of pinch-hitting guest star, touring him around the various Marvel series, before landing him in a secure spot as co-star of Tales to Astonish, along with perennial also-ran Ant-Man. It was in the Tales run, with art by Spider-Man creator Steve Ditko and later a return from Kirby, that Stan really hit his stride with the Hulk series, establishing the Hulk get mad, Hulk get strong motif, and building a strong supporting cast of friends and foes. Rick Jones and Betty remain Banner's closest friends, although only Jones, who later repeats his sidekick role for Captain America, Captain Marvel, and even Rom the Space Knight, knowing the secret of Banner's curse. General Thunderbolt Ross also stays in the forefront as the Hulk's chief antagonist and major thorn in the side of Bruce Banner. Even worse, Ross now has a co-conspirator in the Weasley Major Glenn Talbot, who is not only convinced that Banner secretly works for the Soviets, but also has designs on Betty. Some years later, believing Banner dead, Betty actually marries the pencil-mustachioed twerp Glenn Talbot on the rebound, but then drops him like yesterday's papers when Bruce resurfaces. The 2 strongest contributions to the Hulk mythos from the Tales to Astonish run are Hulk's popular adversaries, the Leader and the Abomination. The Leader first shows his long face in Tales to Astonish number 62 in December of 1964 by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. An average laborer working cleanup in a chemical research plant is accidentally caught in the blast of an experimental gamma-ray cylinder. Inexplicably, the man survives, but after his recovery discovers he now has a voracious desire for knowledge, retaining exact recall of everything he reads. The gamma radiation has a delayed physical effect, and some weeks after the blast, his skull and brain grow to oversized proportions and his skin turns gamma green. He abandons his former identity and, dubbing himself the Leader, turns his unmatched intellect to matters of world conquest. The Leader often tries to use the Hulk as his unwitting pawn in his schemes, but with little success. Whereas the Leader is more than a match for the Hulk in gamma-induced intelligence, the Abomination proves to be an equal threat in gamma-induced strength. Debuting in Tales to Astonish number 90 in April of 1967, Emil Blonsky is yet another communist spy sent to infiltrate and sabotage General Ross's Air Force Base. And you know, maybe if Ross and Glenn Talbot weren't so busy chasing Banner around and yelling traitor all the time, they might have noticed all these dudes with Russian-sounding names suddenly applying for jobs at the military base. Blonsky finds Banner's latest gamma weapon that, unbeknownst to Blonsky, is designed to bombard Banner's own body with enough gamma radiation to kill him and end the threat of the Hulk forever. When security guards bust in and haul off Banner, no doubt to face the latest trumped-up treason charge from Ross and Talbot, Blonsky uses the machine on himself and is bombarded with a far more intense blast of gamma rays than the one that originally transformed Bruce Banner into the Hulk. Luckily for Blonsky, he happens to possess a rare genetic factor, just as Banner and the leader had, that prevents him from being killed by the massive dose of radiation. The gamma rays give Blonsky strength much greater than that of the Hulk, but unlike Banner, he retains his intelligence as well. The downside? The gamma rays mutate him dramatically, transforming him into a hideous creature that Betty Ross names the Abomination. Although Banner later invents a device to drain some of the excess gamma radiation out of the Abomination, taking away some of his strength, the Abomination maintains a baseline strength level greater than that of a relatively calm Hulk. When Hulk gets steamed, though, all bets are off. The Incredible Hulk comic continues in a happy rut throughout most of the 1970s and 80s, with things finally shaking up in 1985 with the arrival of writer-artist John Byrne, who, among other things, physically separates Bruce Banner from the Hulk and finally sees that Bruce and Betty marry, despite thunderbolts showing up and blowing a .32 caliber hole through best man Rick Jones. Not long after that, Banner and Hulk are reintegrated, and writer Peter David began his landmark 12-year run on the series, playing off of a story by writer Bill Mantlo that discusses Bruce's childhood torment at the hands of his abusive father, as well as writer Al Milgram's reintroduction of the Grey Hulk. Under Peter David's pen, the fragmented consciousness of Bruce Banner is fully explored. The character is diagnosed as having multiple personality disorder, with the Bruce Banner personality representing his intellect, the Green Hulk his repressed rage triggered by childhood abuse, which is why the Green Hulk retains a childlike intellect and emotional state, and the Grey Hulk reflecting his darker, repressed instincts, such as lust and greed. One of the many highlights of Peter David's run comes in Incredible Hulk number 347 in September of 1988, in which the Grey Hulk, who retains normal intelligence and a very bad attitude, takes on a new identity as Mr. Fix-It, an enforcer for a casino owner in Vegas. Seeing the Natalie-dressed Hulk pound on mobsters, then cruise back to his penthouse with a fabulous babe on his arm is surreal, to say the least. Just one example of the anything-can-happen approach that Peter David brought to title. In the years to come, writers like Greg Pak, Bruce Jones, and Mark Waid would take Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk into various intriguing and very exciting directions, all of which pretty much based upon the work created by writers like Lee, Mantlo, Byrne, and David. Of all the Marvel characters, the Hulk has had the most success in TV translations. The Hulk's first appearance on the small screen came in the original 1966 Marvel Superheroes animated series from Grant Ray Lawrence, the barely animated moving cutouts of Silver Age Marvel comics that are mostly remembered for their wacky theme songs. Come on, sing it if you know it.
Doc Bruce Banner, belted by gamma rays, turned into the Hulk.
Ain't he on glamour rays?
Wrecking the town with the power of a bull.
Ain't no monster clown who is as lovable
As ever-loving Hulk. Hulk.
The Hulk had much better luck with his next TV project, the 1978 CBS dramatic series The Incredible Hulk. Executive producer Kenneth Johnson kept the most important aspects of the Hulk comics. Banner's struggle with his transformation into the Hulk, played by Mr. Universe Lou Ferrigno, and his search for a cure, and discarded most of the rest of the comics mythology, transplanting the newly renamed David Banner into a premise much like that of the TV classic The Fugitive. Every week, Bill Bixby's Banner would make his way to a new town, searching for a cure for his condition and taking odd jobs along the way to survive, while always being pursued by investigative reporter Jack McGee, played by Jack Colvin. Sure, the show was predictable, but it was a good predictable. Bixby, Colvin, and Ferrigno were appealing and committed to the material, and the action sequences were pretty decent considering the show's budget and when it was produced. The show ran for 5 seasons, ending in 1982, a very respectable run for a 1970s action drama. The 2-hour premiere movie was released on DVD in conjunction with the release of the first Hulk motion picture. You should check it out. The Incredible Hulk animated series in 1982 aired Saturday mornings on NBC in conjunction with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and was produced by Marvel's then new animation division. This series was based on serious old school Hulk, featuring scientist Bruce Banner working at the missile base, with fellow scientist Betty Ross under the watchful eye of Thunderbolt Ross and the still rodent-like Glenn Talbot. Rick Jones was also around, sporting quite the mullet and an enormous cowboy hat. This series only ran 13 episodes, and it was nothing special. Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno returned in 1988 in the first of 3 made-for-TV movies for NBC, The Incredible Hulk Returns. The first of these stinkers featured Thor, Marvel's resident god of thunder. The script played pretty fast and loose with the Thor canon, introducing Don Blake as a former colleague of Bixby's David Banner, who had discovered the Hammer of Thor, which allowed him to mystically summon Thor himself, who was more of a hapless Viking goofball with a penchant for brawling and boozing than any sort of noble thunder god. Those of you bent on punishing yourselves can pick this loser up on video. The Hulk and Daredevil teamed up the next year in The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, in which the Hulk is never actually put on trial, and the only courtroom scene is a dream sequence. This film was memorable mostly for the horrendous Daredevil costume actor Rex Smith sported, all black with a blindfold over his eyes. Okay, we get it, he's blind. This Bixby Ferrigno snoozer also featured Lord of the Rings actor John Rhys Davies as a bearded kingpin, and Hulk and Daredevil creator Stan Lee as Guy in Jury Box. Finally, 1990's The Death of the Incredible Hulk TV movie featured exactly that. The final shot of the film shows the Hulk's dead body after a mid-air fall from a helicopter. Another film, The Rebirth of the Incredible Hulk, was in the works, but Bill Bixby's tragic passing in 1993 permanently shelved the project. This one is also available on DVD, albeit not something we really recommend. The next Incredible Hulk animated series premiered in 1996 as part of UPN's short-lived Sunday morning animation block. This series was produced by the same folks who put together the vastly improved second seasons of the syndicated Fantastic Four and Iron Man series and the quality shows. Aspects from all the Hulk comics made their way into the series, including Rick Jones, the Grey Hulk, Mr. Fix-It, and the John Byrne Hulk separation storyline. The show featured lots of Marvel guest stars as well, including She-Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, The Thing, and Mr. Fantastic. The voice talent was above par too, with Neil McDonough playing Bruce Banner and Lou Ferrigno returning to the role of the Hulk, speaking in the part for the first time. This show ran 2 seasons for 21 episodes and is well worth checking out on video. In recent years, Hulk has been active in Marvel Animation's Disney XD series, both in Spider-Man and in his own series. These, while enjoyable for younger folk, don't quite have the deep context of classic Marvel comics for longtime fans to enjoy, but are still certainly worth your time. The Hulk has had a considerable amount of success on the silver screen as well. Highly anticipated as Marvel's follow-up to the runaway successes of X-Men and Spider-Man, Ang Lee's 2003 film Hulk, although somewhat commercially successful, is widely viewed as a misfire. Almost a psychological drama disguised as a superhero movie, the film devotes far too much time to Bruce Banner's damaged childhood and the backstory of his father, played by Nick Nolte, and not nearly enough to what audiences have come to see: Bruce Banner changing into the Hulk and smashing stuff up. Complicating matters is that the Hulk, rendered on screen entirely by computer graphics, never quite seems real to the viewer, and he's not compelling enough a character to overlook his obvious fakiness. Compounded with an overlong running time and a head-scratching climax that features the Hulk fighting a cloud, the result is a whole lot of angry moviegoers. and you wouldn't like them when they're angry. Happily, the character was redeemed with director Louis Leterrier's The Incredible Hulk in 2008. With a standout cast including Ed Norton, Liv Tyler, William Hurt, and Tim Roth, the film is an extremely entertaining mix of the comic books and the fondly remembered 1970s television series. As for the Hulk himself, he's much more lifelike than the previous version and doesn't look digitally dropped in among his flesh and blood co-stars. He feels much more like a real character on screen and better able to convey emotion. This CGI Hulk also performs much better in the action scenes, which are far better executed here than in the last film, and also a lot more fun, with the army bringing out some slightly sci-fi tinged weaponry against the Hulk, sonic cannons and the like. Norton is the perfect choice to play Bruce Banner, and he portrays both Banner's withdrawn intensity and tortured soul elegantly. Best of all, this film actually has an antagonist in Tim Roth's Abomination, and the resulting fight scene is a doozy. A super slugfest reminiscent of the big Superman vs. General Zod fight in Superman 2, only with much less comedy and played with a lot more brutality. Everything you'd want in a Hulk movie is here. Or at least, that's what we all thought until we saw Joss Whedon's The Avengers in 2012, in which Mark Ruffalo gave us a conflicted yet confident Bruce Banner, more appealing and approachable than any we'd seen before, alongside a CGI-generated Hulk far more lifelike and realistic than anything we'd seen before, which resulted in a surprising star turn for the Hulk in the film, which I think it's safe to say no one expected. Whedon repeated the trick in the follow-up Age of Ultron, which gave us more of both Hulk and Ruffalo's Banner, yet still wisely held back from giving us too much, perhaps realizing that the key to the character is to always leave the viewer wanting more, which makes Bruce Banner and the Hulk's next appearance this November in Thor Ragnarok all the more tantalizing.
Some of our best customers are some of our youngest. I'm Harley Solbaka, and this is Small Talk. My guest today is an avid comic book reader and a Star Wars expert. Why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Tilly, and I am 9 years old, and I brought 2 Loth cat stuffed animals.
Okay, so you have to tell everybody what these are, because they can't see them.
Oh, and the Loth cats are from Rebels. They're like these little cat creatures that live on Lothal, and they're really cute. And I have one, and his name is Kodashan, and I have another one, and her name is Lokatana.
And I can say they're really, really cute. And they're special, too. You got them in Europe?
My dad got them.
He got them at Star Wars Celebration?
Yeah, in England.
That's so cool. Yeah, I didn't get to go to that one. It's a little far from me.
Yeah.
So today we have a lot of things we're talking about, and I know that at the end you have questions for me.
Yes, I do. I have a few.
Just a few?
I was thinking in the car because I didn't have time. I was doing a lot of stuff in school.
That's okay. I mean, school is very important. First, I wanted to talk about comic books, because you've been coming to the shop for a few years now, right? How old were you when you first came?
Not sure.
I feel like you were like 6 or 7?
No, I was like in first grade or kindergarten when I was 6, so I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. Yeah, now I have to think about it. We'll have to ask your parents later.
I'm pretty sure it might be 7 or 8.
And so when did you first start reading comics?
I just started like when I kept coming to the shop and finding ones I like. I started when I was like 7 or 8. But mostly when I was 8, because I wasn't really reading these comics in first grade and stuff. I was reading little books and stuff.
Yeah, well, first grade is when you really start learning how to read.
Yeah.
And start reading other stuff besides like the really simple books, so.
Yeah.
And you read Adventure Time comics. What else do you read?
I read Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I read Teen Titans Go comics, and I read this one, but it was about this monster. I think it was called like, I forgot what it was called. It's like Jelby. It was called Jelby.
Oh, Jelly. Yeah, I love
It's
the
really
Jelly books. Yeah, those ones are super fun. So how many Star Wars specific comics have you read? Because I know that you've read a few with your dad, right?
I don't really read a lot of Star Wars comics. At night, I read, like, these Star Wars books with him. I've already read, like, 3 of them. And right now we're reading a book about Ahsoka. She's from Clone Wars.
So which Star Wars books? Like the chapter books?
Yeah, the ones that have all this different stuff. And in one of them I read, it, like, kept pausing in between to, like, get lessons on how to be a Jedi. It was fun.
Wait, what? What was this book? Tell me more about this book, because I want to be a Jedi.
It was like called "Do You Want to Be a Jedi?" No, "So You Want to Be a Jedi," and it was like book 2 of this 3-book series about these. It's basically the stories of Star Wars, but told differently. And the first one was called "The Princess," like the Scoundrel and the Farm Boy. That was about Leia,
Okay,
Luke,
yes,
and
yeah.
Han, and
Yeah.
they had their different points of view and different parts of the story.
And what story did that book tell? Because it tells it from 3 different perspectives.
Yeah,
And
the
what was the
first
story?
one is Leia, and it's telling like what she was doing on like ships and Alderaan and stuff. And then it was telling about Han, and he was doing things I can't remember. But like at one point, they were doing the cantina scene, and they kind of acknowledged that Luke was there too. And it was cool.
Linking back to the original movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and did you read the Kanan comics?
I've seen them, but I haven't read them yet.
But you're like a huge Rebels fan.
I am, yeah. I mostly watch it, rather read it.
You're the one who tells me that I need to watch Rebels all the time.
Yeah,
I'm
you
almost
need to
done with
watch
Clone
it.
Wars, and then I'll start Rebels, I promise.
Yeah.
I think that
Rebels
you've been
is
telling me to read it.
awesome. It's so much fun.
I think you've been telling me to read it, so I read it. Watch it. Watch Rebels for like 2 years. Like, no joke. I think that's how long you've been telling me to.
Yeah, and I'm trying hard not to do any spoilers, and I promise I won't.
That's okay. We can just be like, hey guys, there's spoilers for Rebels.
No, seriously, I won't. I don't want to.
You want me to experience it for myself the first time?
Yes,
I appreciate that.
do.
So when was the first time you remember seeing Star Wars? The first Star Wars movie?
When I was like 6 or 7, like I think when I was 6 I saw the first movie and I sat through the whole thing without even moving once. Oh, I think 5 to 6, I'm not sure.
It's hard to remember. I don't remember the first time that I saw it because I was really young too.
Me either.
And do you remember some of your first thoughts? Like some of the first things that you liked about Star Wars after you watched the first movie?
I thought it was really cool and I wanted to get to the next movie as fast as possible.
And now we're living in a world where there's going to be a Star Wars movie once a year, basically.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's awesome because there's like new stories every year or so, and it's good to know that there's always going to be more Star Wars.
It's a huge universe because now we know, since Marvel purchased Star Wars, that everything that comes out is all officially part of the Star Wars universe. It's canon. So all the comic books, all the TV shows, all the movies, they all connect, right?
Yeah. After like a few years later when I was watching the prequels, I got a little bored with Phantom Menace and I just wanted to do something else. And one time when I was watching one of the movies, instead of paying attention, I just went over and built an X-Wing out of chairs. And then we had this like wrap you could see through, and I put it on. I just sat in it.
You built an X-Wing out of chairs? How did you do that?
I think I like put a chair in the front and in the back, and I put the 2 chairs on the side because we have 4 chairs. And then I sat in it, and there was like a perfect space between the 2 legs where I could put the screen. It was really fun, and I pretended to drive it.
That's really cool.
Oh, and
that's awesome.
I have the PlayStation VR, and we have like this X-Wing fighter experience. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to do it soon.
So I mean, I don't have it. My boyfriend has it, but he got that like literally like last week. So I'm going to do that too. I'm really excited to know what it feels like to actually be like a pilot.
Yeah, my dad said it was really fun and not that hard.
I'm good with the
good
not
to
that
know.
hard. I'm not very good at video games. Out of all of the Star Wars characters and all of the Star Wars comics and movies and TV shows, who is your favorite character?
Does Rebels count?
Rebels does count.
I like Sabine a lot because she's awesome.
Yes, you have a Sabine costume.
Yes, I do. And I have one for my American Girl doll, too.
Yeah, my mom made those.
Yes. But we made the helmet by ourselves because we just grabbed stuff from Michael's. And
Yeah,
other
I don't
places.
think she would know how to make a helmet.
It's really awesome, and I wear it all the time. And before, when I went to a convention in it, and we braid my hair blue and orange from the first season. She changes her hair in a different color in every season. But when I was wearing the helmet, some of the dye rubbed off on my forehead, and I had color on my forehead.
So for people who are like me and maybe haven't watched a lot of Rebels yet, can you tell us who Sabine is?
She is Mandalorian, and she's from Mandalore. I think she used to be with the Empire, but now she's not. She went off to become a rebel, and she like spray paints a lot of different stuff. She like spray paints pictures of Lothcats and the rebel symbol like everywhere, and her whole costume is covered with different paints and stuff, and it's really cool.
So she's basically like a rebellion artist.
Yes, and her I know what her last name. Her name is Sabine Wren, and it's really cool. And she's from the same planet as Boba Fett, Mandalore. And she's also a Mandalorian.
Is she a bounty hunter like Boba Fett though?
No, she was like training to be one. So she kind of has its helmet, but then she went off to join the rebellion after the Empire tried to get Mandalore. You just figure that out throughout the series. They tell you, but it's not a spoiler. A lot of people know that.
Well, Mandalorian armor all basically has the same structure, which is why it's called Mandalorian armor, right?
Yeah.
So
except Sabine left and did other things.
I did
know
that. I'm also a huge Star Wars fan. We've talked about this. So if you had to pick a favorite character that isn't from Rebels, who would it be?
BB-8.
I love BB-8.
He's funny.
So
cute.
Why you like BB-8 just because he's funny and cute?
I like the droids a lot.
The droids are fun. So I have a question for you. As someone who has watched all the movies, read all comics, both of us.
Yeah, I've seen every Star Wars movie.
How do you feel about the fact that droids can feel?
I think that's actually kind of cool because it's like a long time ago and things feel futuristic. It's really awesome. And
because I had an epiphany not that long ago where I realized that droids can feel pain. Because you know, there's a scene in the original trilogy where they're taking one by his feet and they're burning his feet and he's screaming.
Oh yeah, because I think they can feel it in like their wires and stuff because it basically connects and does all their all their parts that move. So I think it can basically feel the wires, and you know when wires get hot, they like heat up. And
that's actually a really good point. I was always wondering if it was kind of like a built-in nervous system. I don't know, but I remember realizing that they could feel pain and being like, oh wow, they're closer to people than I think we consciously think because they look different.
Yeah, but basically the 3POs, like C-3PO, they look a lot like humans. And my dad was a little confused about this. Like, if Anakin was making a droid just to sweep, why does it know all the languages? That's what he was thinking about. That's a little confusing.
Well, yeah, he has technically, C-3PO has a human cyborg relation, right? So that means that he's supposed to be partially like him. But that's a good point. Why would he make one that was almost fully human just to help out with the cleaning?
Yeah. Maybe because that's the parts he could find or something like that.
Maybe he had bigger ideas for C-3PO, even as a kid.
Yeah, and he just wasn't telling. I'm not sure.
That's a good idea. That's something I'm going to think about for a while now. So with all the new Star Wars comics and movies, how do you feel like when you hear the background story of a character from Rebels, like the Kanan comics, or another story with Chewie? Do you think all the new comics and stories they're adding are adding to the Star Wars universe? Kind
of, because C-3PO gets a red arm in Force Awakens, so some people say that's explained in the comics.
There was actually a one-shot comic that explained why C-3PO had a red arm. It was supposed to come out before the movie, and then it got delayed, and got delayed, and got delayed, and got delayed, and then it got delayed some more. And then it finally came out about 6 months after the movie came out. But yeah.
So the comics do have kind of a relation to the movies and stuff.
And do you think it's a positive relation, or do you think they're giving us too much Star Wars?
I think it's like a positive, because if they just came in with C-3PO with a red arm, everyone wants to know the backstory and they're all confused. So I think it kind of helps people understand the Star Wars universe.
I agree. Yeah, because some people are like, too much Star Wars. But in my opinion, there can never be too much Star Wars.
Not all great stories happen in the pages of a comic book. Some of them happen in the store. Welcome to Judd Meyer's Retails.
The little girl sat at our children's table 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes weekends. Her mother would fit herself into one of the tiny chairs, purse in her lap, reading a Spanish romance novel. The girl would build a small stack of Archies and Tiny Titans and keep them within arm's reach. She read quietly, a stray giggle occasionally escaping her lips. I'd stopped attempting conversation some weeks back. I guess you could say that there was something of a wall between us. I could feel their hesitancy. Maybe it was anxiety, maybe shyness, maybe even fear. After 20, 30, 40 minutes, her mother would tap her watch. Reading time was done. The little girl would put everything away, neatly arranging all the books on the table, and her mother would nod her head in my direction. The girl would stare at her feet, and out they'd go, joining the world passing by. Enter, sit, read, tap the watch, tidy, nod, exit. Week after week, repeat and repeat. One quiet afternoon, reading time in session, I was surprised to hear a tense conversation between the little girl and her mother. "Go talk to him," her mother said. "No," whispered the little girl. I slipped behind the front counter, wanting to be closer in case I was needed, but not too close to scare them away. Her mother gave the girl a nudge, and she stumbled in my direction. She inched toward the counter and looked up at me, eyes bright and beautiful. I thought, what a shame it is that the ground is the only one that gets to see them. "Excuse me," she said sheepishly. "Do you buy comic books?" "Maybe," I replied slowly, then added, "What do you got?" "Betty and Veronica," she said. I considered her reply, letting her see I was taking her seriously. "Well, I like Betty and Veronica. Why don't you bring them in next time you visit, and we'll see what we can do." The little girl paused, nodded her head, and slowly backed away. A tiny gunslinger, ready for the draw. Her mother stood, took the little girl's hand, and gave me her weakly nod. "Hey!" I cried out, startling the little girl. She stared at me with those big eyes, white as saucers. "I don't do business with anyone, unless I know their name." Was that a smile I spied beneath the curtain? A hint of movement at the corner of her mouth? Someone's in there, I thought. Her tiny voice shook loose from her throat, and she responded, "My name is Maria." "Nice to meet you, Maria. I'm Judd. See you soon, okay?" After they'd gone, I made my way to the front window. I watched them walk down the street, hands clasped, an animated conversation in progress. Maria turned her head and glanced back. I held my hand up. She did the same. Patience, I thought. Patience. 2 days later, Maria stepped through the door. She came in slowly, but for the first time, instead of hiding behind her mother's skirt, she led the way. Today, her hands were full, and she had some business to conduct. She approached the counter with just enough confidence to get her to its edge, and then she froze, staring at the floor, shifting her feet. She'd been planning this moment in her mind, but now that she was in it, she forgot what to do next. I looked down at her from behind the counter and said, "Hi, Maria." She courageously raised her head, took a deep breath, let it out, and said, "Hello." "You remember my name?" I said. "Judd," she said, pride in her voice. "Well done," I said. "What's that you've got in your hands?" She reached way up to the counter, small arms just long enough to reach the top. She opened her hands and plopped down 3 crumpled, creased, torn, and water-damaged Betty and Veronica digests. She took 2 slow steps back and began chewing her fingernails like a starving tiger. I took a long pause. I shot a look over at her mother, who quickly looked down at her purse, pretending not to notice this whole exchange. I let the quiet sink into the room, and then I said, "Are you sure you want to part with these, Maria? They're pretty special. They're what we call well-loved comics." Maria began nodding her head, unable to stop. "Okay," I said. "How about we trade? I get these, and you get to go over to the comic racks and pick out what you want in exchange. Her head continued nodding ferociously, and a small squeak escaped from her pursed lips. "What's that?" I asked. She opened her mouth and shook the words free. "Yes," she said. And then again, a little louder, "Yes." I passed my hand over the counter, and she flinched. Her arms flew to her chest, and she leaned away from me. Yes. Fear. I've made a life of reading people. It's what I do. Tens of thousands of human beings, every age, every size, every shape, every gender. I see them all, and I read them as thoroughly as the books that I sell. This lovely child had been through something that made her cast her eyes away from life, that brought them low to the ground, that brought distrust to the words and deeds of others, of adults, of men. "It's okay," I said quietly. "I'd just like to shake your hand so I can be sure we made a good deal." She looked over at her mother, who had inched to the edge of her seat. Her purse was on the floor, her hands gripping her knees so tight that her knuckles had turned white. "Mama," she said, with trepidation. Her mother almost sang the words that came next. I thought of my mother, and nighttime lullabies that made me feel safe, protected, loved. "Si preciosa ella. Está bien." Maria turned to me. She took a few steps forward and reached out for my hand. I tucked it carefully inside my own as if she were my own daughter. I had no doubt that this child had seen a different sort of man's hand before, perhaps one that closed at the fingers, one that delivered a different sort of deal, one that wasn't negotiable. "Gracias, Maria," I said softly, wrapping my other hand around hers. A circle of intimacy, an offering of peace. "Now go pick out your books," I said with a smile. She turned and threw herself toward the kids' racks. She sat on her knees, digging through the piles of comics in search of just the perfect one she could take home and give a place of honor in her room, one that she could make childhood memories with. Because that's what comic books are, aren't they? They're memories. Sure, they sit in our boxes in our closets. Sometimes years go by without us taking them out and flipping through their pages. But just like the photographs in the many albums on our shelves or on our hard drives, we don't need to look at them to remember what they represent. Like our beloved comic books, we recall who we were when we took them, what clothes we wore, the girl in the red sweater we had a crush on, the huffy we rode to the corner store to buy chewing gum. We look at the covers of these comic books and the wonder inside, story, art, advertisements, and we're taken back, lost in the memories of those 4-color photographs. These books don't just bring comfort. They bring what we all so relentlessly seek wherever we can in this life, peace of mind. Maria's mother stared at her, head tilted. Such a lovely smile. It most certainly hid itself away, but it also most certainly ran in the family. Maria suddenly stood up. She said no words. She didn't look over at her mother, which brought me a surge of pride. She stared right in my eyes and held up her copy of Adventure Time, high over her head, hands tightly grasping the paper on both sides. Say anything, I thought. Throw in some Peter Gabriel, and this is just about the perfectly captured moment. "We've got a problem," I said to Maria. Serious, stoic. Her arms fell to her sides, her comic book sliding down to the tips of her fingers. Her mother turned her head toward me, panic in her eyes. "This isn't a good deal at all," I called out to her. There was a long pause. The air disappeared from the room. And then I threw that little girl the biggest smile in my arsenal. The one I reserve for those times when I think no one's looking. I've got 3, and you've only got 1, I said. A fire burst into flame behind Maria's eyes. A smile broke out on her face that made mine pale in comparison. I pointed to the stacks of comics and said, 2 more for you, Maria. I insist. She fell back to her knees and dug her fingers into the paper. Beautiful, beautiful paper that holds so much magic. Magic we spend our lives desperately trying to hold on to. This was her moment. She owned it, and I was honored to watch it happen. Maria's mother stood up. She straightened her skirt. She left her purse behind and approached the counter with a regal sort of stride. She extended her hand, and I gladly took it. My name is Alma, and I'd like to apologize to you, she said. What on earth for? I replied. Alma stared at the floor, a sort of shame washing over her as her hand slipped out of mine. She looked so much like Maria. Maria looked so much like her. Their eyes a shared window to their souls. We come into your beautiful store every week. We sit at your table. Maria reads all of your books, and we never buy anything. It's just... Her voice trailed off, and tears welled up in her eyes. I could tell she didn't want Maria to see this. I glanced over and saw that Maria was deep in thought, debating the merits of My Little Pony and Squirrel Girl. I nodded my head at Alma, letting her know it was safe to speak her mind. I'm a single mother. Maria's father he wasn't a good man, wasn't a kind man. I made him leave, and it was good for us both, but I haven't been able to get work. I don't have the money for these kinds of things, but she loves them so much. She loves reading. She loves her books. She loves it here. Words. They can do so much, or so little. It all depends on the truth of them, doesn't it? And sometimes saying them out loud brings freedom. If we're lucky, relief. 4 walls, a floor, a ceiling, a couple of doors and a light switch. A box. What do we put inside? What do we fill it with? What is here for you? Comic books? Graphic novels? Power totems? No. We fill ours with love. The books are just the conduit, a means by which we send our message, and we hope that message leaves our box, our walls, and makes its way to the beautiful world outside. We all have a calling. When we deny it, we find ourselves discontent, resentful. When we embrace it, the earth spins in all the right directions. My calling is not the selling of paper, of stories or totems. My calling is the gift of safety, the gift of a very public joy, the gift of unconditional love. Don't ever apologize to me, Alma, I said, making sure our eyes met. I pointed to the large plate glass panels that make up our storefront. Do you see those panes of glass? I said. There are no posters on that glass. No flyers, no signs at all. It's bright and open, and I wipe it clean every day. Why do I do that? Because I'm a selfish man, Alma. She shook her head, confused. I walked around the counter and put my arm gently on her shoulder and strolled with her to the front of the shop. She knew I was toying with her, but she smiled and went along with it just the same. We stood at the front window, looking out. Folks strolled by on their cell phones, caught up in their own lives. Imagine you were out there walking down the street, I said. The sun is shining. There's a nice breeze in the sky. You look to your right and you see something kind of wonderful. You see a lovely woman. sitting in a tiny chair. You see her smiling and relaxed. You see her watching a lovely little girl who looks a hell of a lot like her mother. This little girl is lost in a sea of comic books. The mother is happy. The little girl content. If you were out there looking in and you saw all of that, what would you want to do? Well, you'd want to stop your life in progress and come inside. You'd want to get a handful of whatever it is these lovely people are getting. Alma, you two are the best free advertising I could ever hope to get. We both shared a laugh, and Maria looked over at us, rolling her eyes and digging back into the books. Patience, I thought. Patience. I put my hand on Alma's arm, an open hand, a kind hand. You are both welcome here, always, every day. You are welcome to sit. You are welcome to read. You are welcome to enjoy this place. There are 4 walls, and we share time in them together. I have no expectation of either of you. Stay as long as you like, because I'd like you to stay. She spoke Spanish to me then. It sounded like poetry, warm and lovely. I have no idea what the words were she sent my way, but somehow I knew exactly what she was saying. Maria joined us, presenting her choices to me. Adventure Time and 2 wonderful comics about 2 wonderful girls just like her, one a squirrel and one a moon. I kneeled down, slid in close, and said, "Good trade." She smiled and repeated my words back to me. "Good trade." "See you soon," I said. Again my words came back. "See you soon." I stood and nodded at Alma. She nodded back. We'd said all of the words we needed to, and we both understood every one of them. A few days later, I stood behind my counter, doing the things I do, and the door flew open. A little girl exploded through the frame, eyes lit up, a vast smile on her face. She stopped in her tracks, looked right in my eyes, and waved. "Hi, Judd," she called out. "Hi." Well, there she is, I thought. There she is. And then from behind her 3 other little girls appeared. Maria ushered them over to the kids' area in the window and began to give them the grand tour. "Here are the regular comics," she said proudly, "and here are the books. We call them graphic novels." "Ooh," said the girls. "Ah. There's the Kermit and Yoda painting. Look, they're fishing. Isn't that funny? Guess what it's called? Guess." She spoke a mile a minute. No punctuation, barely a breath. "Easy being green it is not," she said, giggling. The girls all laughed, hiccuped, chirped. These are the most welcome of all sounds inside a comic book store. What a gift. Alma stood at the door, watching this improbable scene unfold. We shared a long look, and then she walked to her usual seat. She sat down in the tiny chair. She put her purse on her lap and nodded in my direction. I nodded back and got back to work. There sure is a lot to get done in a bookstore, and a lot to see. I shared all of this with my partner the next day. "It was an amazing transformation," I said. "All I did was give her a few comic books." "No, you didn't," he said. "You gave her our shop. For free. And she gave it to her friends. For free. Because that's what we do." There are so many words in retail. A great retailer once told me that the most powerful 4-letter word we can use in our business is sale. I disagreed with him then. Still do. Yes, there are many 4-letter words to choose from that describe what happens within each of our 4 walls. A ceiling, a floor, a light switch, a bright pane of glass, and the sidewalk in front of it. Kind, warm, help, safe, heal, hope. Give. Love. Free. Amen. The Blastoff podcast is produced by the Colonel, Jeff Fox, Scott Tipton, and me. Original music is composed and performed by Derek Anthony Gray. You can find more of his musical compositions on his website, DerekAnthonyGray.com.
For more information about anything you've heard us talk about today, check us out online at BlastoffComics.com. We have an active Facebook presence, so check us out over there on Facebook. And you can reach us on Twitter at BlastoffComics or on Instagram.
Or you can come by our retail location in North Hollywood in the heart of the Arts District, 5118 Lankershim Boulevard in North Hollywood, just 2 blocks south of Magnolia. See you soon.